Well, the spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that separation from one another is an optical delusion. Separation from one another is actually an optical delusion, and freeing ourselves from this optical delusion is actually the whole purpose of having a church. It's the whole purpose of having a religion in our life. We have all individuated from this grand pool of potentiality. We came through a set of parents who set us on a course of life. And for some of us, that course of life was filled with challenges, either from individual haters or from societal norms which didn't actually include us. And for others, the course was filled with both societal privilege and loving mentors. Wherever you are on that course, you need to dispel the idea, the optical illusion, that we are separate from one another. We're not separate from one another. We're all in this together, and together we can make a difference in each other's lives and the lives of people who arrive on this planet for generations to come. Your children and their children and their children and their children and those children's grandchildren. But we're kidding ourselves if we think this delusion, this optical delusion of separation, will dissolve on its own. It's not going to dissolve on its own. It will take work. It's going to take actually hard work for it to dissolve. Which leads me to a series we're doing right now that will help us with some of this hard work. It comes from a book I've been reading called SQ21, The 21 Skills of Spiritual Intelligence. Now, let's be clear. Spiritual intelligence is not religious intelligence. I know plenty of pious people who walk around and can quote scriptures from the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or the sutras or Ernest Holmes even, who have no idea what spiritual intelligence is. The definition of spiritual intelligence is having the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace no matter what the world throws at you. I don't know about you, but I want that. I want to be able to have compassion and wisdom and inner and outer peace, no matter what's coming up in my life. In the last 2 Sundays, we've looked at the first 5 of the 21 skills under the heading, Know Thyself. Not perfection, not even mastery, but being aware of who we are, what we believe, how we behave in our life that make up who we are. I'm not going to go over the first 5 skills. They're on our YouTube channel if you want. You can see the videos. And that YouTube channel is on the front of your bulletin, so you can take it home if you missed them. I encourage you to check out the first 5. The next 6 that we're going to look at, not today, but we're going to look at a couple today. The next 6 we're going to look at is under the heading, Know Thy World. Know Thy World. So number 6. The awareness of the interconnectedness of life. Einstein wrote, a human being is part of a whole, and we call that whole the universe. We're getting to see this more every day. Today, many of us see ourselves connected with those who are working in sweatshops in developing countries, making clothes and electronics and coffee for us to consume. And now there's a movement called the Fair Trade Consumerism movement. So we have a choice in where we buy our food and our clothing and our coffee and our electronics. Why? Because many of us are beginning to understand that we're connected with those sweatshop workers. They are us, just simply in a different body. We begin to see deeply that what we do to others, we're also doing to ourselves. And not only to ourselves, but to Great Mother Earth, to our environment. When we can understand this and act from it, we're demonstrating spiritual intelligence. Remember, the definition of spiritual intelligence is to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, no matter what the world throws at us. And sometimes what the world throws at us requires us to understand the nuances, the complexities of life. We're not good Americans aren't good at understanding nuances of this thing called life. We're black and white people, sometimes literally black and white people. Other times, we just are righteous people, and we think we know what's the right thing to do in this thing called life. The easiest part of this skill of becoming aware of the interconnectedness of all life is learning respect. Respect for human life and empathy for other people. Now remember, sympathy is where you share the feelings of another person. Empathy is when you understand the feelings of another person, but you don't actually share them. I understand when white people say, hey, look, I don't have privilege. I have empathy for that. I get it. Especially those white people who are struggling to make ends meet, who don't have enough to feed their kids, who don't have enough to enjoy life the way we want to enjoy life. I get it when they say, how can you say that I'm at privilege? I understand straight people who say, I don't have any privilege. I understand able-bodied people who say, I don't have privilege. I get it. I understand it. I don't share that feeling. But when I can begin to have empathy for it, when I can begin to respect where they are and where they've come from without giving up my values, I can begin to practice spiritual intelligence. Now, the more advanced level of this skill is respecting organic life and animal life, understanding the feeling and feeling connected to the earth as a living organism, making choices to live a sustainable lifestyle. And this gets hard. I'm not always good at it myself. It may mean that we have to gently turn away from scientific advances and truly listen to Great Mother Earth. For instance, we now know that forest fires are an important natural way of clearing out brush and allowing new growth. Because of where homes are being built, we often use our new knowledge of how to suppress a fire to save new homes. See, we measure very low on the spiritual intelligence scale of this skill. We are aware of the interconnectivity of life when we forget that Great Mother Earth is one with us. Number 7, awareness of worldviews of other people. Now remember, a worldview is how you see the world, which may or may not be accurate. Our experiences of life often color how we look at the world. If you're poor or rich, gay or straight, black, white, or brown, went to Stanford or got caught up at San Quentin, all of those things will have an effect on how you see the world. Now, we can mitigate that with greater awareness of our own worldview. Yes, I spent time in San Quentin, but I am whole, perfect, and complete just as I am right now. See, God doesn't care what happened yesterday. God only cares what happened, not even this morning. God only cares what's happening right now. Skill number 7, however, asks us to become aware not only of our own worldview, but of everybody else's worldview, of other people's worldview, to the extent we can. Or at least become aware that other people have a worldview that we don't understand. For instance, Wigglesworth cites that what separates us from any other species on the planet is the practice of burying our dead. See, animals don't bury their dead, but we do. And in every culture, there is a ceremony and a process of burying the dead. She speaks of the American way, which is to take someone to a funeral home, drain their blood, putting them in a nice outfit, and put them in a box. And then we have a ceremony over the box, and we put them in a grave or a crypt so the family can go to visit their dead. She even cites the American military, who even to this day are working very hard to bring our soldiers home from Vietnam so that we can bury our dead. We go to great pains. She says she has an American worldview of burials. Now let's consider another perspective on what a proper burial might mean. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is a tradition called a sky burial. Wigglesworth says that when she learned of it, she was quite startled. And when I tell you about it, some of you are going to be quite startled. And you're going to think, oof, no, not that. Wigglesworth said that it was so startling to her that it confronted her worldview. And that's what we want to do in our life. We want to confront our worldview so that we can begin to see them. The Tibetan Buddhists believe that the essence of a person, what we might call a soul, doesn't leave the body immediately. So they take anywhere from 3 days for a normal person or 45 days for an exalted monk to bury them. On burial day, the body is taken before sunrise to a stupa. Now, a stupa is just a cone-shaped kind of building with some shelves in it. Well, they go to the stupa, and a monk comes out and chops up the body and places its parts on the shelves. That's the hard part. The birds then come and eat the parts because Buddhists hold fast to the interconnectedness of life, believing that the bird is eating a body that could be a reincarnated relative. See, if we can release our inherited Judeo-Christian worldview for a moment, we can see that this is a beautiful ritual, full of humility and interconnectedness. What might the Buddhists think of the American method of burying people? Could it look to them as crazy, wasting land and materials, and withholding the body from the cycles of life? If in this country we could begin to see the worldview of both sides of the gun issue, we could sooner reach a way to limit machine guns, what now people are calling automatic weapons. They're still machine guns. We could find a way to put that to an end. If we could begin to see a worldview of those on both sides of police violence, then maybe we could see an end to young black men and increasingly young black women being shot. If we could begin to see a worldview of Muslims and Christians, maybe we could see an end to thinking that every Muslim is a terrorist. See, right now, the battle that we're raged in Jerusalem and Palestine is a great example of what happens when we go to our corners, when we don't look at the nuances of any situation. See, we're fortunate here at CSA because Reverend Brenda and the Ujima ministry team continue to find ways so that we can shake up our worldview. Shake up our worldview and begin to embrace more authentic inclusion. Soon you're going to hear of a discussion she's planning to address the issue of defunding the police. Now, if you've been coming here for a while, you know I hate that term. I think it is a counterproductive term, defunding the police. I think it just makes people nervous and mad and run away. I think it's not helpful. But here's what I know. I don't really know what it means. I don't know what that means. And yet here I'm spouting about what a terrible term it is. If what it means is that they're willing to take money away from the police and put it to areas of society that will meet the needs of systemic racism before it gets to be a police matter, I'm all for it. But the truth is, I don't even know that. I don't know. So I will be in her class when that comes up, her discussion, because I think curiosity is so important in our life. Where have each of us put out family members, Facebook friends, co-workers, because they are supremacists of some kind? They're either racial supremacists or climate change supremacists or gender supremacists or lifestyle supremacists. Could we begin to use spiritual intelligence to find out more about their belief system and how it got there? One of our practitioners talked about an issue she had last week. She was standing at the grocery store behind a biker, and she knew he was a biker because he had a leather vest on and chaps on, and it said somebody's motorcycle club. So she was pretty sure the guy was a biker. He also, on the back of his hat, had a button that said White Lives Matter. And she said she stood, it was a long line, she said, fortunately. So she stood there for a few minutes to get up her courage. And finally, she tapped him on the shoulder. He turned around. And she said, could you tell me why you have that button on? And he said, well, you say Black Lives Matter. I get to say White Lives Matter. And she said, yeah, you do. And I'm glad you're saying it. And we never said only Black Lives Matter. And I'm hoping you don't say only White Lives Matter. Well, he sputtered and sputtered. And eventually they began to have a conversation. They began to have a dialogue. Now, Jerry said, look, I'm not going to invite this guy home for dinner or anything. But we had a moment in which we broke through and we began to see the nuances of life. I began to see his worldview. He misunderstood what Black Lives Matter meant. And I was able to talk to him. That's what we need to do. I want to leave you with a phrase I learned from one of my Friday noon students from Atlanta. Tunes in every Friday from Atlanta. And she was saying, we were talking about one of Ernest Holmes' beliefs. And she has this phrase that I've been contemplating. You know, if you've been with me for a while, I take one phrase and I use that as my contemplation for the week. And the phrase is, soft on people, hard on systems. Soft on people, hard on systems. If we could begin to learn to do that, if we could begin to learn to be soft on people, knowing that everybody is an emanation of the one, everybody, and that this idea that we're separate is simply an optical delusion. Let's take this message into prayer. There's only one power. It's the power of love. It's the power of God. It's that power that runs through each and every one of us, whether we're awake and aware or asleep. God is right where we are. I give thanks for that. I release this word into law, and together we say, and so it is.